Okay. I think many of you know who I am. The director of the International Owl Center. My name is Karla Bloem, and I've been kind of got sucked into inadvertently documenting barn owls using acoustic monitoring. So I kind of went through some historical MOU records to look at detections or reports of barn owls by decade over the years. And you can see in the 20s, there was quite a few. In the 60s, there were quite a few. And that's when we tend to hear it from the public was, when they were a kid on the farm, they would see usually just one, usually not a pair. But it was more in the late 50s and early 60s is when we tend to get reports. Things picked up a little bit between 2010 and 2019, and this just has kind of estimated individual numbers, and it's pretty hard to say sometimes when we're getting detections within the same region, if that's the same individual or different individuals. So this was a fairly conservative guess, and it doesn't include 2024 data. So basically, barn owls are kind of considered extraliminal, so they don't get any special status in Minnesota. They're not special concern, rare, endangered, that kind of thing. They're just kind of like, well, hey, they show up every now and then. MOU status as of 2014 considered them accidental, but current status is casual because of the increasing number of reports basically every year. So the way I got sucked into this, I was doing great horned owl vocal research. We had a captive breeding pair, Rusty and Iris. But we had ultra-sensitive microphones in their aviaries that would pick up all audio within about half a mile of the area. And in 2014, we picked up a wild barn owl. So that was pretty exciting. After 2014, I think it was 2016, we got a captive barn owl. And then things really got more interesting because there was a reason for vocal interaction. So you have to remember when owls are vocalizing, vocalizations are communication. There's an intended recipient. They don't just randomly sit there and make sounds. There's an intended recipient. So if there's nobody out there, they're not going to be saying much. So when we have a captive barn owl, then you get more conversations going on. So Piper the barn owl has actually been a helpful part of this research. And I'm not sure how this video is going to come through, but it's her sitting in her aviary. Hopefully the audio comes through okay. She's going to scream first, and then you'll see her head turn as a wild one flies by, screaming back at her at very close range. That one was very close. So with the video, we were able to, that helped us detect wild barn owls because we could see Piper's behavior, and we have 24/7 recordings of her. So in 2017, we recorded wild barn owls again, 2018, 2019. And by that time, I was thinking, okay, the wild barn owls are probably not saying, oh, look, there's International Owl Center facilities, let's go there. They were probably just in other locations. We just had fixed equipment and couldn't do anything to detect them in other locations. So in 2020, with a grant from the Minnesota Ornithologists Union, I was able to get 2 song meter minis from Wildlife Acoustics that run on batteries. Basically think a trail cam, except it records audio instead of video and photos. And then you could put those in different locations and move them around. Used cable locks to attach them to trees. And I processed the audio, because there's a whole lot of audio that comes out of those, through Kaleidoscope Pro software. I got a subscription for that. There is a free version that doesn't have some of the features that if somebody was interested in doing this, you could do it with the free version also. And Piper helped us test the settings. And it was very convenient. This happened in 2020 when everything was shut down during COVID, so I had time to focus on this. So I do recordings after sunset, 30 to 60 minutes after sunset, and shut it off before sunrise. Barn owls are very nocturnal. A lot of owls are more crepuscular, so they're doing a lot of calling at dawn and dusk. Barn owls are just strictly nocturnal. They're calling in the middle of the night, not at sunrise and sunset. The sample rate has to be set at twice the frequency, the highest frequency that you intend to record. So I was going for 12,000 hertz. Just for convenience sakes, they were chopped into 30-minute recordings and maximized the gain at 24 decibels so I could get as far away as possible. And with Piper's help, I could tell that I could detect a a barn owl call. It was Piper because I moved the recorder farther away, up to a kilometer away from the recorder. So I also tested the Kaleidoscope Pro settings. Most of this you probably don't care too much about. The frequency range is of note, though. This is higher than most owl calls. Most owl calls wind up being 1,000 or less. So this is a pretty high frequency owl call, which seems odd. It's a harsh one, but it's higher frequency. And then you set the detection length, maximum intersyllable gap, blah, blah, blah. If you want this information, I can share it with you, but it's not going to mean much to most of you unless you want to delve into using Kaleidoscope. So when you're using Kaleidoscope to detect the recordings, you're feeding in boatloads of data, telling it what to look for, and then it pulls out everything that matches those parameters, which is a whole lot more than just barn owl calls. So you see spectrograms, and you can just run through these spectrograms really quick if they don't look like barn owl calls. But anything that looks similar, you have to listen to because the audio can be totally different than a barn owl. So raccoons can look real similar. Gray tree frogs. Here's a barn owl. And juvenile great horned owl begging calls are highly variable, but some of them look an awful lot like a barn owl call. So what I did in 2020, because I only had 2 recorders, I put them in different locations, usually about 1 kilometer apart, and then moved them every 2 weeks so I could cover a bigger area. So that was mostly Houston, Fillmore, Winona, and Olmsted counties. And what I found was 2 new locations for barn owls. So that was pretty exciting. But it was an awful lot of work. So in 2020, I had 393 recorder nights. I drove over 1,000 miles, spent over 150 hours to get barn owl calls literally just on 9 nights at 3 locations. And that included our home base here also. So it's a lot of work, but it's kind of like winning the lottery, basically. Then what we did, we made some barn owl boxes, and Zumbro Valley Audubon also did and gave us some. We put 5 boxes in likely habitat or where we had detected them before, and we put trail cams on 3 of those boxes to see if we could detect the barn owls that way. 2021, we were able to get 3 more song meter minis, 2 with a grant from the MOU, 1 from the DNR, and we got a song meter micro to test from the company. We also were able to get lithium-ion batteries. That was a feature that was added by the company. That was a huge boon because that allowed to deploy the recorders for up to 3 months at a time using the settings I was using. And very key, we could deploy them all winter long. The typical batteries would not allow us to deploy them year-round, so the lithium ions allowed that. Since the barn owls were not calling very much, I tried a different strategy in 2021. I put the recorders in fixed locations and left them there for basically the whole recording season as they came in. I didn't have them all at the beginning of the season. And that worked because we got barn owls there, and there. There was only 1 location we didn't pick up a wild barn owl, and we struck out with the trail cams. Nothing noted. Even at the locations where we detected barn owls acoustically, we did not detect anything on a trail cam. So this chart kind of shows each location and detections. The bottom one was a nest site, so a lot there. But basically, even where we're getting them, it's hardly anything. Then this barn owl nest in La Crosse. Okay, so that randomly came up. A young one fell out of the nest. Was turned into rehab. We heard about it, went and looked for the nest site. It was obvious. It was this 3/4 dead silver maple tree that had a giant cavity in it, and there were 3 more babies in it. So we were able to get the one back there. So, but this was a unique opportunity to be able to record at a nest location. So I could get the territorial call, which I already knew. Could get lots of begging calls, which is just a psst. And I thought, oh, I'll get some food delivery calls. Nope, they don't say anything when they deliver food. You just hear the kids going ballistic. And I got a mobbing scream. So this is in a very specific context. when the young are ready to fledge or right at fledging age or just have fledged, and there's a dog or some perceived extreme threat in the area, they do these mobbing screams. They're like bloody murder, and they just keep screaming till the source of whatever they're scared of goes away. And this will just go on and on until the dog or whatever leaves. These calls, many people might not recognize as barn owl calls, and these calls are one of the reasons that American barn owls have now been officially separated as a separate species from the other barn owls in the world. American barn owls do these. The other ones do not. It's kind of cleeks and squeaks. And these are calls that you're mostly just going to hear if there's more than one barn owl in the area. It may just be a mated pair thing. I'm not sure, but I don't think you're going to hear this if there's a single bird. And it's nice to confirm captive bird vocalizations matched with wild bird vocalizations and see that we're seeing the same thing. So in 2021, it was less effort for more bang for the buck. So way more recorder nights, driving less time spent, and 41 individual screams on 13 nights at 6 locations. That's still not a lot, but for barn owls, that's a lot. So still exciting for a large amount of work going in there. So 2022, it seemed like a lot was going on the Mississippi River corridor. So I placed several focused along there, and I thought, let's randomly pick another site. And one of our staff had suitable habitat at her parents' place in Freeborn County. So we thought, what the heck, let's stick one over there. And then, of course, the La Crosse nest site. And the La Crosse nest, the original nest that we found was in the fall. They did nest the next spring, but the young kept jumping out of the nest. They wound up in rehab. A storm snapped the nest tree down, so that was the end of that nest. The neighbors did put up a nest box, but it was never occupied after that. So here were the recorder locations for 2022. They were kind of everywhere. I got them at every single location I had a recorder at. So that's really exciting. And detection rates, so where we have a nest and a known roost site, you get high detection rates and really low rates pretty much anywhere else. 2023, I was working on getting ready for the World Owl Conference, so I just really minimized my effort and again relied on my one staff person who happened to have a grandma up in Cambridge and drove past Austin. So we put recorders there and we picked one up by Cambridge, one call, one night, out of a whole entire year of recording. And over in Austin, we got skunked on that one. Although there were Cope's gray tree frogs there, and they are spectrographically almost indistinguishable from a barn owl call. And the frogs call a lot. So literally, there were tens of thousands of calls to sort through. So I could have missed something. So detection rates there, again, very, very low. 2024, I also minimized what I was doing because I'm trying to get some other stuff done, like build a new owl center. On the river between La Crosse and La Crescent, we got them there at our regular location. And then this other spot that I keep thinking is perfect habitat, I got skunked at again. Still didn't get any over there. Now, this is where things get interesting. When you take the dates where I've detected barn owls, it's very clear that if you're looking to detect them acoustically, you should be looking March, April, May, or middle of September to early November. The rest of the year, they hardly call at all. So interesting to see the focus times of years when they're calling. And then I went back through MOU records to look at what's been found since 2011. So these are dead specimens that have been reported and found. So starting in 2013, 2019, 2020, 2023, 2023. So we've gotten a couple from down here in Houston County. And, you know, there's certainly more than this. People don't always realize that barn owls are rare. These are photographed specimens, so that includes ones that have been in the hand also. So we've got Rice County, St. Louis County, Winona County, Houston, Hennepin. So that's all of those. And then nests include Becker, Ottertail, Wabasha, and then we had this lacrosse nest that was just barely across the river in 2021. And audio recordings, I mean, I got the first one in 2014, and then there were kind of a gazillion every year since then. Not a gazillion, but many. So there, and it wasn't just me, there are a couple other people that have submitted audio recordings too. Here's detections by MOU records prior to 2011. And if we put current reports on top of that, you can kind of see they're spreading out as they have been, kind of all over the place. So what the heck is going on? Barn owls don't live more than 1 or 2 years on average. It's a very short-lived species. They're capable of living a long time, but life happens. They starve to death easily. They get hit by cars. They get poisoned by rodenticides. They just typically don't live very long. They're sexually mature at only 7 months of age. This is not normal for most owls. So they actually can nest up to twice per year, even this far north. So remember I mentioned that lacrosse nest was a fall one when it was found, and they nested again in the spring. And several of these other nests that were found were fall nests. So they are into outputting lots of babies. And they can also disperse wildly long distances in any direction. So they just show up anywhere and everywhere. I mean, like that one in January in Saxon Bog, like that's insane. So their reproductive biology allows them to recolonize areas fairly rapidly because they're outputting a lot of babies. They disperse wildly. So you can kind of think of them as the rabbits, kind of flying rabbits. So you make tons of babies, you've got really high mortality, but then when they fly like crazy, they're set up to recolonize areas, which seems to be what's kind of happening. And when I record barn owls, it's usually just 1 to 4 calls on one night or a couple nights. And my impression is somebody's flying around by themselves saying, hey, anybody here? Anybody? Anybody? Oh, okay. And they keep going because they're not calling much unless there's another owl to interact with. So tips for documenting barn owls. This vehicle, yes, that's actually barn owl poop on it. So if somebody tells you they've got an owl roosting in their building, it's probably a screech owl or a barn owl. So if it's not one of the little guys, definitely follow up and check that out. So this was in a shed that had been damaged. They like to be in buildings that nobody goes into, and this was a shed that almost nobody went into, and they had been roosting in it for probably a year. So there was massive amounts of poop. Get audio, video, photos, doesn't matter how bad they are. Sometimes we can still tell what they are, but document. Be sure to document them. Photograph any potential feathers you find on site. You can't legally keep the feathers, but do photograph them for the record. And collect pellets. Barn owl pellets are different than other owl pellets. Most other owl pellets are sausage shaped. Barn owl pellets are a little more oval and fatter. They're usually more densely packed, and they're always very dark. And it's really bizarre. We can feed white rats to our barn owl, and those pellets come out black or very, very, very dark. So do collect pellets if you think you found a spot where barn owls are roosting, even if you're not seeing the barn owls, because sometimes we can identify the barn owls by the pellets. So lots of thank yous for this, especially the Minnesota Ornithologists Union. That was the thing that got it started, the grant there. Minnesota DNR, Wildlife Acoustic, Zembro Valley Audubon, some private donors, and assistance from my husband, staff, Piper the American Barn Owl, and a lot of private landowners. So, and thanks for letting me present remotely. I apologize. I did want to be there, and there was a whole bunch of you I wanted to see and talk to today, but we're extremely short-staffed today, and one of our staff, one of the 2 that could work, tested positive for COVID last night. And it's like, okay, time out, revamp. So thanks for bearing with me and letting me present remotely. Any questions? If there's time for questions. I guess they may have to get typed in or something.
I'm gonna see if we can try questions. If not, I'm gonna tell Karla to put up her last slide, so you have contact information for Karla. So I'm gonna type that real quick. Oh boy. Well, I don't like that a lot, very much at all. But let's try one question and see how it goes.
Have barn owls ever nested in nest boxes?
I'm not sure the best way to share my email on screen. It's Karla@internationalowlcenter.org. Does the chat show up on the screen? Okay.
Okay, Gordon, I'm going to type in your question.
Have barn owls ever nested in nest boxes?
Oh, do barn owls nest in nest boxes? Well, theoretically, they nest in nest boxes, but they haven't here. So Zumbro Valley Audubon put up a bunch. We have several of them up. Other people have put them up, and I've never heard of a barn owl nesting in them. So the nests that we know of, one was in a barn, one was in a deer stand, one was in the bridge, on one of the beams under the bridge in Wabasha, and then we had this one in a tree. My concern about the barn owl nest boxes is a lot of the designs that are online have a small entrance that's, I think, 3.75 inches by 4.25. So we put one of those boxes in our barn owl aviary, and she was like, oh, box, hole. And she, like magnet, right at the hole. She physically could not get in there. So I'm concerned that northern barn owls probably are larger than California ones and Texas ones, so that ours should have at least a 6-inch diameter hole. I think the Minnesota DNR design is like 6 by 7-inch square. So if you're doing a box, make sure it's got a big enough hole for our northern birds and give them enough space. Don't give them a little teeny space because they got a lot of babies, they need room.
Okay.
Hi, I'm curious, how is the lifespan of 1 to 2 years verified? That is really short.
The question, Karla, for you was a lifespan question. Why such a short lifespan? How can you verify the short lifespan?
I can't hear you. Oh, how is the lifespan verified? Okay, so the only way you can know for sure is if they're banded as juveniles. So that's pretty tough because almost nobody's banding barn owls around here. I assume the one that went to the Raptor Center this fall probably got a band on it. So it's just that incidental stuff. But elsewhere they have been banded quite extensively. So it's a matter of finding the dead ones that have been banded.
Okay. We've got one more for you.
From what I understand, barn owls have low sight fidelity. Have you noticed any sight fidelity, and has this impacted your research?
Oh, sight fidelity. I don't know if I can say a whole lot about sight fidelity other than I can say that lacrosse nest, they nested in the fall, they nested there again in the spring. The other locations, as far as I'm aware, they didn't re-nest at those locations. I mean, obviously the one that nested in the bridge was probably traumatized by all the stuff going on, and they probably went, we're not nesting here again. And I think they're fairly portable. So, if the nest is there and it's good and they didn't get disturbed much, they may stick around. I think in California, if you get them in boxes, they'll keep coming back. I can't speak to it a whole lot otherwise, other than they prefer if they're not disturbed. And if it's still there, they may come back, but no guarantees. Female owls can be fickle in their choices.
Clinton, any more questions?
I think we're good.
You're welcome. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I hope to see a whole bunch of you again soon. Thanks for letting me do it this way, and come visit the Owl Center. And I'm also going to put in a shameless plug. check out Cat Blue's book, Owl Music. I am an owl book snob. That book is special, and you can't skim it. You have to read it. It's a 7-minute read. Absolutely go check it out. That is a special book.